let's talk about specificity. Have you ever heard about that term? Specificity, CSS? No? Right. So even though you may have not heard about it, you've applied several times already. So you already know it, but you don't know that you already know it, right? And that's important to master, because in the long term, when we think about scaling projects, scaling modern software, we tend to focus on JavaScript, we tend to focus on performance, which is important. It's probably actually the most important thing. But because of a reason, we tend to ignore a bit the CSS aspect, right? We've been interviewing lots of developers that are really good with JavaScript, but they are terrible with CSS, right? To me, this is not acceptable. If you want to be a top developer, you need to master every single aspect of the development, and CSS is definitely an important thing. You cannot imagine how much time you can spend in a project just fixing CSS issues because the architecture is wrong. So in that particular case, I would like to talk about how specificity works, because the better understanding you have about how CSS works, you know, the better you'll be predicting what the outcome of your visual styling will be. So let's start creating a box. Deep class name box. So if the text of the box is who is winning card thing today, so then we go to the CSS and then box. Let's have some basic properties on it. So what will this display? A green square. Correct. Correct. That's correct, right? But now, so I do a pull request, and Osman's approve it. But then someone else said, no, that's I don't like green color, so let's do that. So what's the background color now? Is it blue or green? That's correct. It's blue. Yeah. And so what happened if then my pull request review, I said, no, please, can you move it to the top? Will this make any difference? Yes or no? Why? It will be green. Why green, Alex?
Because the CSS is red from the top to bottom.
Correct.
Green is more at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
So it overrides the blue.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. So in this particular aspect, we are overwriting the box property, right? Technically speaking, we are not overwriting it. So for example, or maybe yes, I don't know. So do you think the box model properties here, you remember box model on Friday? Yes, I'm sure you remember, right? Forever. So will these highlighted properties be applied? Yes or no? Yes. So in reality, when we do that, when we declare the same CSS selector, we are not overwriting it, we're just extending it. Right? So in case of conflict, it will override the properties. So that means that the color should be green or blue? Green. Correct. And what happens if someone else joins the team and then he's not very happy with our CSS structure and then he does that? What's the color now? Green or blue? Green. Why green? Why blue?
Don't have the box. Means look at the box. Look at the class box in the class app.
Mm-hmm.
But the box at the bottom It means the same. It's still the same box. So it will be green.
It will be green. You agree on that?
Yeah. I'm not sure. It makes sense, but applying specificity
Right.
looks more specific.
Right.
than-
Right.
than-
So this is one of the reasons why projects struggle to maintain in the long term, because we are unable to understand these simple things, right? So Alex is wrong. The color will be blue. And it will be blue because of a simple rule. Because the first selector, even that it comes first, so it breaks the previous rule that the last one wins, the first one is more specific. Specificity. Where is the most specific selector? Is that one or that one? It's that one, right? Box is blue. So, specificity, the most beautiful answer, because it's shorter, it's precise, it's exact. What specificity is? Specificity is a number. It's as simple as that. It's just a number. So the browser will have to decide, do we apply this background color or that background color? It will calculate how specific each rule is. And to calculate the specificity, it will apply a number. So depending on the selector, the number will be A or B. For example, generally speaking, when we select a class, the number is 10. Oh, wrong. So number is 10. But here, because we have two classes, the specificity is 20. So this set of rules have priority. If they don't conflict, like the color, then it's fine, no problem at all. But if they do conflict, this one wins, even though it's declared before.
So all the boxes in the app will be blue, but the boxes that are not in the app will be green.
That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. Why this is more specific? Because here we're selecting all the boxes that belong to the app element, which may not be the case in all these scenarios. So for example, let's add another tag here. So div class name equals wrapper, and then so if we do that, and if we add another box outside, can we reuse the same class name? That's the entire principle about classes, right? That you can reuse them. Right, so can you tell me the colors on the screen? Blue, green, green, blue, 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 green, green, yellow?
Blue, green.
Blue, blue.
Blue, green. Why blue, green?
Oh, wait, no.
Blue,
No,
blue.
blue.
Blue, blue. Why blue, blue?
Because they're both inside the app.
Correct. 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 But what happened if then we change things a bit? So we leave that here, but instead of pointing to the app, we point to the wrapper. Oh. Colors.
Blue, green.
Blue, green. Correct. Correct. Why the green box looks dodgy?
Because it's not. Dot
Inside
box
the
doesn't
wrapper.
have those attributes.
Correct. Correct. Right? Blue, green. And if we put that at the bottom,
Blue, green. Yeah.
green, blue. That's very exotic. Why green, blue?
Blue, green, the same thing.
Same thing.
Marta, why green, blue? Right, so this is not going to affect at all. So the thing is, if they have different specificity, it doesn't matter where this goes, either on top, at the bottom, it doesn't matter. It's just this wins, right? This rule wins. So it will be always blue-green. Correct. Right? So that's one thing. But then there are multiple ways to select CSS, right? So for example, what happens if instead of having divs, we have spans? Span is another type of HTML tag, right? So I can do that. Spans by default get displayed inline. Do you know the difference between display block and display inline? Correct. Inline is like a link. A link is inline because if you put something nearby, everything will be displayed alongside. A block, like a div, it fits all the available width, right? So if we do that, because I want, display, wrong. Display block, and then, yeah, so let's change the background color here. Purple. You like it, eh? So what are the colors now? Blue and green. All right, let me make it more complicated. What are the colors now? The same. Why the same? That's correct. That's correct. So tag selectors, like spam, they weight specificity 1. Right? So this is even less specific than that. So you can put it at the end. You can put it anywhere, right? But this is going to be absolutely ignored, as you can see, right? And then, so we got classes. We have tag selectors. What else? How else can we select elements in CSS? IDs, correct. I didn't want to talk about IDs yet. What else, apart from IDs? One more. No one? How do you, if you have a web application and you have forms, right, with inputs and things like that, how do you style all the inputs that are password fields, for example? I want to style the passwords, but I don't want to style the other type of fields like text areas, combo boxes, or stuff like that. And I don't want to add any class name. I just want to use default HTML standards. We can put that, right? Not wrong. Ah, I like that. Yes. Look. So if I got input type text, yeah, and value equals hello, and then I have another input type password, type value world. So let's see what this displays. You see at the bottom, it's a bit small, right? But you got 2 inputs. So what happened if I'm a demigod in CSS and I want to put the password with a red background, right? Because I think that the number of customers will massively increase with a red background color on the password. So how do we do that without modifying the DOM structure? Because I don't want to add a class name every time, I add a password. So technically speaking, can we do that? Correct. If we do that, it does work, but I don't want to do that on the text. I just want to change the password.
Is it to do with type?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. That's correct. You can do that. Actually, you can do that. So this is an attribute selector.
What weight does it have?
What weight? That's a good question. As far as I remember, it's the same as classes. is 10. And we'll double check that in a minute. So it's definitely more than tag selectors because it's a bit more specific, right? Here you don't want to select all the inputs, just the type password.
Very specific.
Yeah. So, because we agree that this is the most beautiful piece of CSS ever created. So let's remove it. And then let's add some attributes to our markup. So, let me simplify a bit the DOM structure, otherwise it could be a bit challenging to debug. So what happened if we now to the div class name, no, let's keep it as a span. Span class name box, and then title equals karting. So if we put here type equals karting, background color yellow.
Oh, it's type. It's not title.
It's title, correct. Thank you. Title karting. So our box. What's the color of our box? Yellow. No. Blue. Okay, interesting. Ah, look at that.
You don't know what?
That-
Oh, yeah.
That's a classic issue, right? Why the box is not blue? Because you don't have wrapper, right? So that's why it's important to.
We had that so many times.
Yeah, that's a classic thing, right? Someone, hey, this is according to the specificity standards. This is 10 plus 10 equals 20, right? So that thing on the right, this should clearly win. But my box is not blue.
It's not anything.
It's not. Yeah. It's, oh, wait a minute. It's yellow. What's going on? Right. What's going on? Obviously, we don't have any wrapper. Right. So even though that's correct, this is more specific. Wrapper doesn't exist, right? What happened now? Blue. Correct. Why? Because that's still more specific. 20. But we clearly know that this is the most specific one. So I'll comment it for now. Now, what's the background color? Yellow. Why yellow? Correct. If my theory is correct, and I'm not 100% sure, but I'm 90% sure that the specificity of an attribute is the same as the class name, so there is a draw, right? This one and that one, they are fighting for the same resource, even the span, but the span is clearly out of the game because the span is 1. So the span is the span, the background color of the span ignored. But between the attribute and the class name, I believe it should be yellow because it's displayed later on. Correct. Correct. And what happens if then, just to double check the theory, if we put the attribute on top of the class name? What's the background color now?
Should be green, is that the same?
It should be green, blue. Who said blue? Blue is commented, right? Right, so if the theory is correct, so this is a good candidate scoring 10, but that one scores 10 as well, so that should win, right? So it should be green, correct. So that theory was correct. So attribute and classes are equally important in terms of specificity. So then, you mentioned something before, that there was a fourth way to selecting attributes, which was ID, correct, ID. So IDs were very important in the 90s, not anymore. And the reason why they are not that important anymore, don't get me wrong, they are still used, is because in the past it was pretty much the only way to select DOM elements, but now you have React, you have Angular, you have these nice frameworks that facilitates all these things for you, right? So if the ID is box, and I put at the very top, I put box, and then background color equals orange. Oh, right. if the background color is orange, on the ID, which one wins? The orange. Why the orange? What's the specificity of an ID? 1?
Probably 10. No,
Higher.
1. If it's, I mean, the thing is, right.
Actually, it doesn't. If it's 10, it'll be yellow.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Assume that, yeah, it's 10, right?
15.
If it's 10, then what would be the background color if it was 10? Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Probably 20.
It's probably 20. No, it's not 20. But yeah, but good try. No. But you got it right. It's higher than 10, right? It's
12.
100.
Oh my
Oh, this is very strong, right? It's
Biggest one.
yeah, it's the alpha male of the CSS. Well, not yet, right? Not yet, but it's a good candidate, right?
There's another one.
There are a few more. But anyway, but that one's definitely stronger, right? So the background color now should be orange, correct? Right? And what happened if then we put here again?
Still orange.
Still orange, right? Because here that's still 20.
You can put 5 more apps.
Yeah, no. Okay, can we do that?
I don't think you can. Can you do that?
Right, you'll be probably fired, right? If you, I mean, I will fire you if I see that. I mean,
Is that legal? Does that work?
well, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, if it works, it's green.
If it works, it should be green.
The second class should be in first.
Correct,
yeah,
correct.
yeah.
So Alex is correct. That won't work because it's assuming that you have an app inside of another app, inside, which is not correct. But technically speaking, and I'm not going to do that, right? Because I'm not going to waste my and your time. If you create a pretty complex DOM structure, you can make it, right? 10 plus 10 plus, even with a span, right? If you put 100 spans, 101, or no, 100 spans here,
And does it work?
of course it will work.
It will be horrible if we have
Yeah. Do you want to do it? You can do it later on. I mean, listen, with React, you can do, for each, a map, and you can test it easily, right? Anyway. Yeah, so the thing is, that returns 20, which is better than 10, but it's not as good as 100. So that box is still 100, right? Important. I'll go there in a minute. So for now we got 1. Actually, I forgot. To be honest, there is something. Is there anything lower than 1?
Is there a lower than 1?
Yeah. A div. No, a div is 1 because a div is attack, right? Is there anything scoring 0? Yes, there is. It's the wildcard selector. The star. So what? I need a new color, guys. Purple. We got purple. Oh no, we removed. No, yeah, with red. Pink. Oh, pink. Nice one. Pink. So, will the pink color get ever displayed on the screen? What do you think? So that. Correct. I expect some pink colors. Here you go. Right? But that's correct. Why everything is pink? Because wildcard applies to every single HTML element, starting from the HTML itself, right? So yeah, that has specificity 0. So at the moment, the boss is the ID. But there are 2 ways to defeat the ID. So, any idea which ones? With important, correct. Before going to the important, there is another one.
App ID.
What?
Can you do that?
No, because of course you can do that, right? So what's now the specificity of that selector? 110, correct. But in reality, we are just reusing what we know, right? But there is a new mechanism. Have you ever heard about inline styling? So inline styling, yeah, that thing, right? I mean, it's good you never heard about it because it's about practice. It's the same. Oh, we'll see in a minute. We'll see in a minute. So can I do that?
Who am I? You got this?
Did I? Did I?
Tell me that.
I need a new
I had style. Oh yeah, no, I thought I had. Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, style. Yeah, it's true. That's
The
true.
one that I
That's true.
found the hardest.
Right. So, yeah, give me a new color, guy. Cyan. Does that make sense? I don't know. It's weird.
Song of Red.
Cyan? Yeah, cyan.
Magenta.
Magenta. Yeah, that's too much for me. I need a new coffee to understand magenta. Right, cyan. So, what happened now? What's the color of our box?
Cyan.
That's a good question.
If it's not in the CSS, it must be the strongest.
That's a good question. That syntax, that's a good spot, Marta. That syntax is not HTML standard. So if you are working with plain HTML, you'll do that. Style.
This is JSX.
Yes. So this is the official syntax in HTML. However, with React, you can do that, which is nice because that means you can pass an object and then you can transform this case. What's the name of that case? Wrong. Kebab. We can transform kebab case into camel. Correct. Correct. Actually, if you try that, we'll see that in a minute. I think React will complain, but we'll see that in a minute.
So you can pass a whole set of styling.
Yeah, of course. You can pass multi is an object, right? So you can pass multiple properties.
That's the strongest of 1000.
Right. So first of all, what's the color now? Cyan. Well, let me get rid of the pink because this is destroying my eyes. I don't want to have an accident on the car today. Right. It's cyan. It's cyan. That's correct. That's correct. So what's the specificity of the inline styles? More.
1000.
1000. That's correct. That's correct. That's correct. Right. So again, you can defeat it with 1,000 nested spans. You probably have other kind of issues if you do that, right? Right. Is there anything else that can? At the moment, you know, the alpha male is clearly that the inline styling, right? But is there anything else that can defeat it? You mentioned it before. Important, correct. So, to be honest, I'm not even 100% sure about that, but I'm not sure. I promise I'm not sure because, yeah. So will it be now cyan or purple?
Wait, where have you written this?
At the bottom.
In the span.
Oh, right.
Yeah, in the span. I'm not sure. I promise. I will say I'm. I don't know. I would say 55%. I would say purple, but I don't know. Yeah, it's purple, so I was right. Yes. So that's there is nothing more specific than the important suffix, right? There's nothing more
So
specific.
if you
than
have
that.
a bug in CSS and you just want it to be, just put important next to it, and it will definitely work.
Yeah, so there is a classic way. No, not a well. There's a classic and a simple, effective way to evaluate or to smell how good or how bad the quality of your CSS is. You know how, right? Search how many times the word important is in the code. Right? You know what was the right answer, right? To have good quality code. 0, correct. Anything.
What's the value important?
Well,
2000.
I don't know what's the value of important, but it's definitely more than 1,000. I don't know what's the value.
Why isn't it
10,000.
That's a good question because someone thought it was a good idea to incorporate it. It's very old. Important has been there from the first day, probably. And probably on the first day, CSS was so small that no one thought that in 2018 that could massively grow and you can have real issues with it, right? So standards. I mean, have you seen? So there is a book about JavaScript. JavaScript versus JavaScript, the good parts. That one. This is my favorite picture ever, right? So this is the answer for Marta's question. Why is if it's bad, it's on the standard, right? So on the left hand side you got JavaScript standard. On the right hand side you got JavaScript the good parts by Mr. Crockford, right? So you can see that the good parts is just a small subset of the standard, right? I mean
Is that saying that you can just use the good parts?
No, it's not that you can use. It's that you should use.
And with just the good parts, you can create everything you can create with the standard.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because here, so this guy is talking about lots of different patterns or strategies and blah blah blah, and maybe here, you know,
Reduce.
yeah. So here, for example, he's talking probably he spends a lot of time talking about difference between double equals and triple equals, you know, identity equality, blah blah blah, 20 pages about that. And that guy, he said, Douglas, that guy, he's like 70 years old. He said, double equals is evil, never use it, right? That's why the book is short, right? So the same thing applies to CSS and actually to every standard in the world, right? The standard doesn't mean that everything is great. And why it hasn't got removed, because when you create a standard, it's not that simple to remove legacy things, right? Because there are projects using the old standard. So it's a matter of respect to existing customers. This is a bit off topic. One of the reasons why Angular, not that that's unfair, but Angular is not the king of JavaScript anymore, because in Angular 2, they recreated everything. So the community thought it was a lack of respect to the hundreds or thousands of projects that massively rely on Angular 1, because they had to rewrite everything from scratch. So they say, no, never again, right? Let's do React, Vue, or whatever. Right, so then we've seen that the important suffix is more prominent, it's bolder. And what about now? What's the color now? I added a couple of importants.
Oh, crap. Green.
It's green, correct. Oh. Yeah, it's green.
10,020.
Correct. Yeah. It's, well, maybe, I don't know if it's 10,000, 5,000, but yeah, it's definitely greater, right? So, and then, okay, so we understand that the important suffix is wrong. Do you think that inline styles are right or wrong? Wrong. Okay, so, say it again? In some cases.
We used it in one of the tasks with the background image when we were like rendering pictures.
Correct. That's correct. Ian. So I'll tell you. So if you got the answer, can you add the important suffix? Can you add the inline styling? The acceptable solution is that's about practice, blah blah blah. So that's. I mean, you said yes, do it. That's wrong, obviously. If you said no, that's about practice, scalability, blah blah, that's good. That's an acceptable solution. However, I'm going to give you something that they first of all won't expect, and they may not even know. So they will be extremely positively surprised if you tell them some scenarios where it's acceptable to do this kind of hacks. So what is scenario on the important? So imagine that you are integrating a third-party library. So for example, Victor, you've been using a slider, right?
Yeah.
But the slider, that's an HTML component. However, if you go to codedit.com/rank, a nice sign in and all these things.
Say integrating third party.
Yeah, correct. npm install, right?
Yeah.
So when you do npm install, you can install that slider. So this is not an HTML slider. This is a plugin. Why? Because you see, it gives you all these things, right? It's a more powerful mechanism. So by doing that, generally speaking, the way you integrate these things is first of all npm install name of the library, and then import my CSS to have some styling. What happened? Generally speaking, maybe by default that slider is green, is purple, pink, whatever, and I don't want to have a pink slider at the bottom, right? Because it doesn't match the general styling. Because of that, I want to change the styles of the third-party library. So if I come here and I say, I don't know, just pseudocode, slider, no, it's background color, it's our color. If we do that, oh, what's wrong? The column, right? If I put that background color, it won't work. It won't work because the guy who created that slider, he probably on his CSS, he has a slider or dot full, dot bar, dot slider, right? So he wins. Or even worse, he may have that. I don't know. I don't have control on his library. I don't know what he did.
But in that case, is it for your use? Is it not just all right for you to put important on your one?
Well, that's the thing. That's the solution.
But he might have dot 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 important, and then you don't know, and you can't.
I don't know. The thing is, I'm trying several strategies and wrong. So so I'm trying to put so it was red, for example, and I'm trying to put that color. Wrong. Yeah. It's red. I'm trying, I'm trying all these things, right? Specificity, IDs, still red. So eventually, the only thing I can do is that, right?
Yeah, and it possibly might not work if he has.
That will always work because generally speaking, when you import a library, the first thing you do is you import the library, and then you put your styles at the bottom. So even if the guy was brave enough to do that on his library, that's fine, because eventually I'm going to do the same. So I will win because I come later.
Okay.
So that's one valid.
If he has dot app dot blah blah dot slider.
Fair enough.
Does he win in that case?
Probably. But in that case, I'll need to figure out. I mean, yeah. You have to make it more specific. Yeah. That's it. You have to make it. You need to figure out how, right? So the thing is, this to me as a first attempt, that's wrong. So that would be the elegant approach. Let's try to change it.
Well, wasn't the question when should we use inline styling?
No. I haven't talked about inline styling yet. I'm talking about the slash important suffix.
Okay.
So to me, this is the only valid scenario where you don't have control on a specific part of your code because you are using a external dependency, like a slider, like a calendar, this kind of UI components that you can easily integrate, right? So then you can do it, but again, it shouldn't be your first thing, your first option. That should be the last one. And generally speaking, it's good on top of that file. So this overrides existing props, CSS rules. So we have to use import and blah, blah. Try to be descriptive, right? Then it's acceptable. Of course, never ever touch the source code of the library directly, because eventually he'll release a new version, so your changes will be overwritten by his new version. So never touch it. Leave it. And then externally try to override, try to defeat all these rules, right? So to me, that would be a very elegant answer to when to use important. Can you use important? No, but, well, maybe in this case. And then let's talk about inline styling. So there are, generally speaking, inline styling is wrong. You need a very strong reason to use inline styling. So reason number one, as Gin suggested, is for dynamic rules. So, for example, if this is background image, let's think about React a bit, and this is URL, and then slash images slash player dot ID. You know that idea, right? You want to fetch something dynamically. I cannot do that on the CSS because this is static, right? Or also, you know that sometimes you hover a box and you get a tooltip, but you move your cursor and the tooltip follows you. I'm sure you've seen that in some websites. So you need to do it inline because the position of the tooltip will depend on the position of the cursor because it will follow you, right? So for these kind of dynamic things, you need some kind of real time or not real time, but you definitely need to display something dynamically depending on the data model or on the user event. You need inline styles, right? It's impossible to handle them in CSS. So that's the first case. The second case, and this is like the most exotic one, and a bit controversial, but still valid, is performance. So inline styles are a bit more performant than external CSS styles, right? Some companies like Amazon, they intensively use inline styles, right? So that's why you go to amazon.com.co.uk, you do right click, inspect, right? You sniff a bit what they did, you'll see that a lot, right? But why? Because obviously we're talking about a huge company that performance is super important, right? So this is extreme situation. And I'll tell you more. Even though in the output they have that, I'm 99.9% sure that in reality, in development time, they never do that. I'm sure they don't do that. I can't imagine them doing this kind of thing. What I'm sure they do is they work on CSS, but they have a process, they have a mechanism, and that's not that weird. I'm sure that exists today in 2018. They have a mechanism that when you do npm run build, you remember npm run build? So that mechanism inlines everything. So you got box, okay, so that mechanism creates a background with that thing here, right? Why this is good? Because first of all, from development time, you keep your styling clean and tidy, but then on run time, then your styling is a bit more performant, right? This is the second case where you could use, if you have a very strong reason, you could use inline styling. And then one more thing. So generally speaking, one of the issues of styling is specificity, right? You want to change a color, it doesn't work, you add another class name, and then the other guy got upset because you changed it, so then he puts important, so the other guy got even more upset, so he puts, it's an unnecessary battle between developers, right? So, or even between yourself, right? You can do the portfolio, and you can review it in 6 months' time, and then you can struggle to understand your own code, right? So, to minimize the impact of these things, there are some CSS development patterns. So one of my favorite ones is Smax. You heard about Smax? I recommend you to read that book. It's very easy to read. It's a very short book. I think it's like, 40 pages or something like that. I think you can download the PDF, and if you read it, you can put it in your profile, in your CV, and that talks a lot about you, right? Because you look after CSS. So you'll be joining a company that they have really good JavaScript developers, for sure, but I'm not sure if all these companies have good CSS developers, right? So if you can bring that capability to improve their CSS, they will really appreciate that, right? So this book talks about several things. Yeah, I don't remember what was that. Just have a look to the book. But one of probably the favorite chapter is when it talks about stop doing that. Try to avoid nesting rules. So what that means? Let me clean up a bit. So his theory, and he's an expert CSS developer, so he really knows what he's talking about. So his theory is, if you want to style the app, you do that. Fair enough. It works, all good. If you want to style the box, which belongs to the app, that's an option, right? That's an option. That's okay. It will work. What is it? Say it again. Oh, true. Yeah, remove it. Thank you, Alex. Yeah. Right. So if we have that, hopefully, yeah. Right. So that's okay. But then, if you want to be more specific, you can do that. And that's correct. But eventually, if you start nesting CSS selectors, you are opening a very dangerous door, right? Because someone could do wrapper, someone can bring a more specific, right? So we can start having problems in the long term with specificity rules. So his theory is never do that. Never nest CSS rules with a space in between. If you want to do that, then go to the child component you want to style and do that. Use a dash. If you use a dash, you keep your CSS dry because you just have one level of selectors. So that clearly helps to debug your CSS, right? And if inside of the box you have a title, so if I want to style the title, right? Never do that. And never do that neither. Keep it dry. To keep it dry, again, do that. You see? Now it's very easy to follow your CSS because you have one level of nesting, and then if you want to understand where title belongs to, you can see that title belongs to something called box and that belongs to something called app, right? That approach is not perfect. It has some caveats. So for example, if I rename app to wrapper, probably I need to rename it on the right hand side, right? That's why less may help a bit, but yeah, but apart from that, I think that the strategy is good, right? He also talks about the difference between using dashes and underscores. So a dash means there is something inside of it. An underscore means this is change the state. So for example, if you select a user and you want to change the background color, so you can click on the box. So yeah, I'm not going to do that now, but essentially you can do that. Box is active or is active, so then background color red, right? So when you use the underscore, that means I'm still talking about the same component, the box, but it's on a special state. It's selected, it's removed, it's edited, whatever, right? We change the state of that object. Cool, so that's pretty much it, guys. Any question? No? Cool. Yeah, thank you very much.